All right, our next exercise science lab, we're continuing the elbow joint. So we're going to talk about a jam analysis with the overhead tricep extension, and then we're going to talk about a tricep cable press down versus a stiff arm pull down. So all about the triceps today. The movement we are talking about, let's see what the best angle is this, all right? So getting into this split stance and getting a pull like that. Can you see that, all right? So that's the move there, okay? So we talked about stances. I like a squared stance with your feet, or a split stance, or a single leg stance. So this is a good split stance position, all right? So let's break down all the positions. For me to just get into this position here, right, this is my starting position, all right? So what are my shoulder blades doing, all right? I'm in a split stance. My rectus abdominis is sort of the fixator for my spine and my core, right? My shoulder blades, or my shoulders are what? My shoulder girdle can be still, it can be elevated a little bit. If my arms are flexed this far, my shoulder blades are going to be upward rotated and they're going to be elevated some. All right. Now, as I go to engage and provide stability through my shoulder girdle, I'm going to also contract my serratus anterior. So there's a lot going on here. I like this exercise as long as your elbows and shoulders are healthy enough to do it. Okay. So your shoulder girdle, upward rotation, elevation. So you get the upper traps involved, the levator scapula involved for elevation. You got upward rotation. Upper traps, mid traps, right? And then you also got the serratus anterior, all right? The pec minor may come into play, especially in this position for upward rotation. For protraction and stability, you got the serratus anterior as well, all right? So there's your muscles for your shoulder girdle. Your arm, your shoulder joint, your glenohumeral joint is flexed, right? Go from this position, I flex up to this position. Just think about your glenohumeral joint, okay? So now, here's the tricky part, and this is what we talked about a little bit in lab today, is that, well, I had to, the joint action is flexion, okay? The joint action is flexion, but my anterior delt, if I grab the cable like this and turn around, it's just passive flexion. I'm not using my anterior deltoids to pull myself into flexion. The joint action or position, though, is flexion, okay? Now, I step out. I have about 70, 80 pounds on the weight stack right now. So in order to hold this position, this is an isometric contraction. I'm isometrically contracting my shoulder joint muscles. So what? Your teres major, your latissimus dorsi, okay? Primarily those just to hold this position tight, along with my core, my anterior core muscles, things like that, okay? So I hold this, then I'm doing the tricep extension. So again, one of the primary points we discussed in lab today is that we think about doing a triceps workout. We think about going through an exercise like this where we're just doing our triceps, which is great, work your triceps. But when we stand in a position like this with the cable, it's training so many more muscles. Your leg muscles are firing, your abs, your torso, your core muscles are firing. Then in order to hold this position here, our lats and our teres major have to fire isometrically just to hold that position tight. Now we're stable, now we can do the exercise. And the exercise itself is the tricep extension, okay? Tris, 3, ceps is head, and then brachii is arm or upper arm, right? So you have 3 heads to an upper arm muscle, that's your triceps. Just like the 2 heads to the upper arm muscle is the biceps, okay? So this is the important part we talked about and why we started discussing what good form is, what we call quote unquote good form when we do an exercise, is that there's not, you see it all in the gym, right? You walk into any gym and you can see someone doing this exercise. If they're doing this exercise, there's no right or wrong. It's just understanding that you are, maybe getting some momentum going with that slight shoulder extension. Maybe you want to produce more force. Maybe you want to work your lats a little bit, okay? But know that just that little bit of shoulder extension right there to start the movement is going to probably engage actually your shoulder girdle. I can protract my shoulder blades, extend my shoulders, engage my teres major, my lats, and then drive out with my triceps. But back to just the triceps is, remember, and here's the other key point of this lab, is that all of our triceps extend our elbow, okay? But the long head of our triceps also extends our shoulder, okay? So while all 3 of them extend your elbow, they all go from your humerus down to your ulna to extend your elbow, the long head of the triceps actually goes up and inserts or originates rather on the scapula. So it makes the tricep, the long head of the tricep specifically, a shoulder extender. Okay, so it's going to assist in things along with your lats and your teres major, okay? So that's the overhead tricep extension. The stiff arm pull down is here. So I'm in this position here. I'm gonna slightly bend with my torso, hips out, and then I'm gonna keep my arms stiff, not locked out straight, but just stiff there, okay? So think about what's going on here as well, is that this is just pure shoulder extension, right? I gotta engage all those other muscles, but what you might see is if bad form looks like this, bad posture, because you're probably not engaging those lower and mid traps we talked about that help retract and depress the shoulder blades. Okay, the lower traps, mid traps are typically weaker than the upper trap, or they just fire out of sequence is probably a better way to say it. So you depress your shoulder blades, set your shoulder blades down, and then pull through. So again, shoulder extension is my lats, my teres major, and the long head of my triceps. Okay, if I come here, now I'm hitting all three heads of my triceps. Okay, but again, what I like to do though with someone, I might do a stiff arm pull down to hit total shoulder extension and then come close and do just a press down there. So again, kind of some bodybuilding moves, but I like some isolated body part moves just because it helps us understand these different body parts. And this also, we get into pushes and pulls and some of the natural fundamental moves and things like that. And it just depends on, triceps are typically a pressing move, but if you're doing a pull down like that, we're technically calling it a pull. But shoulder extension is going to involve the long head of your tricep. All right, I think that was it, right? So that was the jam analysis. No, that was the jam analysis for the overhead triceps extension with the rope. You should be able to fill that out. The stabilizers are always the glenohumeral joint. That's really the only one we just call the rotator cuff the stabilizers of the glenohumeral joint. The fixators for this class, but you'll see this different in different practices in different clinics and classes, is that the fixators are one joint proximal from the one you're talking about. So if you're talking about the shoulder joint, the fixator is the shoulder girdle. If we're talking about the shoulder girdle, the fixator is the spine. Okay, so, and especially when we're doing that overhead tricep extension, it's sort of like what's fixating our body so we can do this movement, right? And that's where we get, just more and more central or more proximal into our axial skeleton, to use all kinds of fun kinesiology terms. All right, so Chapter 6, Elbow Training 101, Question 5 and Question 6. That's the other thing we covered. What is the difference between engaging the triceps muscle using a stiff arm cable pull down with a bar handle and a regular triceps cable press down with elbows at the side? All right, the difference is that when your elbows are at the side, you're just holding, the joint action is kind of neutral at the shoulder joint. When you're doing the stiff arm cable pull down, you're getting extension of the shoulder. And how does that affect the long head of the triceps? Question 6 is essentially the same thing. I didn't set up my camera for this, but what is the difference between doing a standing biceps curl with dumbbells with elbows at your side versus leaning back seated at a bench? All right, so if I'm doing a standing bicep curl here, I'm going to work the two heads of my bicep, okay? My short head and my long head. Remember, this short head connects to my cord process. My long head goes through that little bicipital groove over my humeral head, and it connects to the labrum up above on my humerus, okay? And the labrum of my glenoid fossa, okay? The short head, remember the long head has a ways to travel. Travels up through that bicipital groove and then over that humerus bone, where the short head just pops right onto this cord pretty short, okay? The difference is this. It's just like the triceps. Both bicep muscles flex the elbow. The long head of the biceps also flexes the shoulder, okay? Now, see guys in the gym doing stuff like this, and I'm not a fan of a lot of these types of raises necessarily, but for people that you are working with, patients, clients, whoever, or when you're doing them yourself, just be aware of the fact that you are working your biceps tendon. If you're gonna strengthen or stiffen or tighten up that bicep tendon, you wanna be careful then when you get into overhead sports or when you're reaching in the backseat of your car. We gave an example of Lauren being on the basketball court, stealing a pass, right? To where if she's tight with this tendon, she goes in this position here. You steal a pass, you get caught in someone's jersey, whatever the case, that bicep tendon pops out of place. You get some bicep tendonitis, okay? And you can kind of palpate that groove by going right into the anterior shoulder and palpate that tendon back and forth. Okay, so again, the long head of the triceps extends the shoulder, the long head of the biceps flexes the shoulder, okay? And then in the other video, we talked about pronation and supination. Just a quick reminder is the biceps brachii connects to the medial portion of that radial head, so that radius head. So when you flex the bicep, it also wants to supinate. Okay, so when you supinate, you're in a strong biceps brachii position. That's why with the chin up, your biceps are stronger. When you pronate, you lose some of that bicep strength. Okay, so there's a review. Those should fill out your lab report. All right, using some fancy kinesiology language. Knock that out, rewind, listen over and over again, and I'll see you next time.